Hi everyone, by now you should be well on your way with the research aspect for Assessment 2. With a couple of weeks left to go, I have put this clip together to go over the marking criteria, what's expected of you, and to help you think about how you're going to take your research findings and recommendations from a hardcore research project to create a visual summary by way of a poster that's informative and appealing. First, let's take a look at the marking rubric criteria to determine what you're being marked on and therefore what you should focus your efforts on. So there's two criteria here for the poster. One looks at your ability to articulate research in a concise and logical way relevant to a management context. This criteria is about your selection and editing of information. So being purposeful in your selection of what to include and also what you leave out. So you have a 2,000 word report, you can't possibly include everything. So you need to make some pretty harsh decisions on what has to be in the poster and what you're going to leave out. You need to make sure that what you do include is relevant to your intended audience. The second criteria looks at your ability to use visual communication skills and techniques for impact, and it's about how you bring the different elements of your poster together. So we're talking about layout, formatting, imagery, presenting these in a way that's impactful and communicates your messages to your audience powerfully. So while I will acknowledge that we're not graphic design students here, but what I will say is in the graduate roles you're likely to move into over the next 1 or 2 years, there will often be times that you're tasked with creating communication or marketing material relevant to your various projects, okay? So or if you're in an organisation with more resources, you might be responsible for managing the graphic design contract. Either way, developing your knowledge of effective communication design is important, whether you are required to come up with it yourself, working in Illustrator or another technology, or if you need to liaise with a contractor to get your desired outcome for your organisation. Okay, so make sure that you have had a look through the rubric marking criteria, where you're focusing your efforts. Both of these criteria are worth the same amount for this assessment, and overall this assessment is, the poster is worth 10% of your overall mark. Okay, so let's take a little bit more of an in-depth look about deciding and organising your content. What I will say here is less is best. Okay, think about your own experiences of looking at posters or visual communication around campus. Think about how often do you stop to read detailed pages of information. I know I don't, and I would assume you guys don't either. So if we're rarely stopping to take on lots of information, think about this when you're designing your poster. You don't need to include all of the information from your research report. You can't, okay? You also don't need to use full sentences. So you might need to come back through your report, pull out some key points and create some really nice short, sharp bullet points for this. If you can do this well, this is where you're going to perform better on that first criteria in the rubric. So by making some ruthless decisions about what to include, what to leave out, and what you do include, how to communicate those bits really well. Okay. Remember that images are your friend, all right? Whether it's key information presented in graphs, if you have some icons or like some little infographics for your key findings, think about ways to showcase these as well, okay? Don't bury them in lots of text. Try and make the images work for themselves, or you have a few words accompanying them to provide some commentary. Also, think about, we can't just cut and paste necessarily from our reports, okay? So you might need to update any figures or graphs for the purpose of the poster. So it might not work to just drop in exactly what you've used in your report. You might need to simplify your graph. You might need to think about ways of drawing attention to key information, like do you need to use some little arrows to highlight important things in the graph. You might want to simplify some labels so that someone who hasn't read your report can interpret findings just from looking at what you've got on the poster. So really think about how you take that research content and turn it into something that's suited for visual communication. The other part of that is think about, yes, this is a poster, but you also need to be able to tell a story through what you're presenting. Structure is really important to your poster, just as it is in your research report. So your poster layout should be a logical sequence of information. Now think about in our Western learning setting, people naturally read from left to right and top to bottom. And so think about how you might reflect that in your poster. There's a few different layouts. If you Google online research poster layout, a few different examples will come out. Whatever layout you go with, you want to make sure that you have a logical presentation of information, okay? Use things like subheadings, number your sections if it works for your layout. And that can also be really helpful in assisting your reader to know how to read and interpret your poster. Okay, so just another little example here is, you know, thinking about, so, you know, a popular approach is to think about a landscape orientation for your paper and then splitting the page into 3 columns. And so we know that we start here, we present some information, some text and graphs, we have another block of information here and another block here. And so your audience knows how they should be reading through. You might take this approach, you might find another one that works for you as well. Regardless of the approach you take, make sure that it's clear to readers where they're meant to start and where they end. Okay, some tips for layout. White space is your friend. Don't think that you have to fill up the whole page, okay? It's really important that you give your text boxes and graphs or your images room to breathe. This helps the audience read and digest your information. If you fill every space, your poster will become cluttered and the reader will be overwhelmed by stimulus on the page. So one stat in poster design is that 40% of your poster page should be blank. Use your white space strategically to draw attention to the most important messages in your research. The next idea, choose the right colour palette. So colour can really liven up your poster, but be selective. You don't want to have any more than 3 to 5 colours, okay? Avoid overly bright colours, and also think about when you're designing digitally, how things are going to look when you print them out, okay? So make sure that you factor that in when you're designing your poster. Also avoid using patterns or dark colours for the background. These can be distracting. It can also make it difficult for the reader to take in information. Can also make like your presentation of figures and graphs look really strange too on a dark background. So white is the easiest to work with, and it's also for you guys the cheapest to print out. Okay. Text size is important. If your text is too small, you'll frustrate your audience. No one will stay to read if they've got to squint to try and read what you've written. So given our poster size is A3, you want to make sure you can easily read your text from about 1 metre away. All right, so this might mean that the text size you're working with is somewhere around a 20 to 24 point font. So have a play around with that as you're designing and see what works for you. Use professional fonts. That's really important. Novelty fonts like Comic Sans, avoid them because they don't portray a really professional kind of sophisticated approach, okay? Also avoid using too many different fonts. Lots of fonts in a poster communicates chaos, all right? And we want to give a really streamlined professional feel to our posters. So it is acceptable to use different fonts for headings and body text, okay? So for headings, you might use what we call a sans serif font, such as Arial or Helvetica, those really block type letter styles. But for body text, you want to use a serif font. Serif fonts are those with the extra strokes at the end. So think about a Times New Roman font. We use them because they're easier to read, better for readability. Okay. Also think of a concise, interesting heading. Okay, a big thing to capture your audience's attention. So at the same time, you want to not only communicate what it is you've looked at, but you also kind of within that want to manage expectations of the information that they're about to read. Okay, so do take some time thinking about the heading title, the poster title. And justifying text to the left rather than to the centre. Again, this is about making it easy for your reader. Justifying your text helps reading information quickly. Okay, staying disciplined with these types of style and layout issues can make a big difference to the quality of your final product. Now, I've had some questions on referencing. Include, yes, I want some referencing, but not everything from your research report. Okay, you'll include just some key references. That might be 2 or 3 or 4 key references. Include them as really small text in a margin. So if someone that read your poster really wants to find out more about something, you've given them the resource there to go and have a little bit of a further look. Okay, so that finishes up this clip on criteria and your approach. Key points here, make sure that you understand your poster needs to draw on your report. So if you haven't actioned your report already, that's really important for you to get into. And remember that you will need to do some refinement with content to take from a research report to a concise and impactful visual summary. So make sure you leave yourself some time to get this poster component right. There's another clip I'm going to put together around the creation and presentation process. So that's another one you might want to have a look at after after this. Okay, good luck, guys. Thanks.